Good morning and welcome to our February AT Talk. Today we have Amy Hayes and Renee Lyon presenting on AT on the job. Amy is an occupational safety advisor with the Business Network Division. Her professional interests focus on ergonomic workstation design, task chair evaluations, job analysis, and assistive technology evaluations. Her current projects include work injury prevention training and job analysis to businesses throughout the state and workplace reasonable accommodations for state of Michigan employees. Amy earned her Bachelor of Science degree from Eastern Michigan University in occupational therapy. Renee is the on-site occupational therapist at Michigan Career and Technical Institute. Her professional interests focus on accommodation support for transition youth, participating in training and employment, and providing support to local companies during the hiring or retention process of employees. Renee earned her associate's degree as an occupational therapist assistant from Grand Rapids Community College and her Master of Science degree in occupational therapy from Western Michigan University in 2005. If you have questions, please use the Q&A box. If you would like a sketch or certificate of attendance for this session, please send me an email and I'll drop my email address in the chat box. Welcome, Amy and Renee.
Thank you, Diane. I am Renee Lyon, and I'm not quite sure what else to say after that intro other than I am a female with my contacts in, so no glasses today, wearing a gray sweater vest and white shirt.
All right, good morning, everyone. I am Amy Hayes. Thank you for the warm introduction. I am a white female with blue eyes and blondish brown hair and wearing a burgundy blouse today. Good morning.
And I'm Claudette Reed, occupational therapist that works with Amy and Renee. I am a blonde female with glasses, red turtleneck, and navy sweater. I will be answering questions in the Q&A and working behind the scenes. And so you will not hear or see from me anymore. Thank you.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started with our presentation. Just a couple of housekeeping rules first. Exercise patience, especially with technology. We all know there's glitches here and there. And if you can, mute your microphones and turn off your video. Auto captions are available for today's meeting. Just click the CC icon to view. That's down at your bottom right. And this is your training. As Claudette said, she'll be available. Please type questions in the chat box and she'll respond directly to you. You can also, if you feel like you need to, unmute yourself to provide comment or ask a question. Just say your name before speaking, but there will be a Q&A at the end of the presentation. And just some Zoom accessibility, zoom.us/accessibility, or you can call 888-799-9666 if you need assistance. If you're unable to access the chat with assistive technology during the presentation, please use the resource information provided following the training and we'll address your question. So what is an accommodation? I would like to just let you know, I'm going to turn off my camera. As an accommodation to myself, I had to use some low tech and print my notes because I only have one screen today. So I'm going to turn it off for now. But anyways, an accommodation is under the Title I of the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. A reasonable accommodation is a modification, adjustment to a job, the work environment, or the way things are usually done. An accommodation is intended to give everyone equal access, and it levels the playing field for sure. An accommodation does not guarantee success, but can bridge the gap between what the task requires and what the worker can do because of disability-related functional limitations. Depending on the nature of the position and the employee's disability, an accommodation might involve providing certain work-related equipment, such as an ergonomic keyboard or an anti-fatigue mat, making alterations to a physical workplace, such as raising or lowering work surface height, installing barriers to promote safety. It could be modifying work schedules, maybe start the day earlier or later, take breaks as needed, as long as the hours worked are what is expected. Maybe offering telecommuting. Many have experienced this lately, right? I know I have. If a job or specific aspects of the job can be completed through telecommuting, it is a reasonable accommodation and should be allowed for this. Maybe restructuring non-essential duties, reassigning the employee to an open light duty job could be an accommodation. Maybe establishing designated parking or accessible transportation. Again, accommodations under Title I of the ADA is a modification or adjustment to a job, the work environment, or the way things are usually done. Workers must be able to perform the essential functions of the job with the accommodation in place. The accommodation must be reasonable in terms of cost and impact on the business. So accommodations can be low tech and high tech. High tech accommodations are things like specialized programs on computers, like JAWS, maybe Zoom text, Dragon Naturally Speaking, which is a voice to text software. It can be those things like a communication device or an alarm reminder to complete a specific task. An OCR, an optical character recognition app, a cell phone calendar, or text-to-speech technology are also high-tech accommodations. How often do we use these tools ourselves, especially the alarms and the digital calendars these days? So how many of us woke up to our cell phone alarm this morning? So some low-tech accommodations are things like our famous sock aids and reachers, which assist with dressing or everyday activities. Some other low-tech may be a pencil grip, the bump dots on a microwave, or using a to-do list, or what I'm doing, using my printed notes. I use technology every day. My cell phone wakes me up. The calendar on my cell phone or on my computer tells me what is my schedule every day. I have both digital and paper to-do lists. And who of us use Siri or Alexa? These are also considered technology. I also use on my iPhone the speech to text daily when I'm messaging. Comes in quite handy, saves the fingers. All right, so what is a disability? The ADA defines a person with a disability as a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. Record of such impairment, even if they do not currently have a disability, not have a disability, but are regarded as having a disability, and or association with a person with a disability. It is important to remember that in the context of the ADA, disability is a legal term rather than a medical one. The ADA also makes it unlawful to discriminate against a person based on that person's association with a person with a disability. Association may be like not hiring someone because you know they have a child with a disability. Or another example is having a significant other or spouse who has cancer, meaning that they may need treatment and need time off, and you may need to assist with that. So some functional limitations would include physical. It could be strength, your overall joint range of motion, maybe your coordination, and that could include fine motor coordination or gross motor coordination, and your motor planning. As far as sensory, that could involve your vision, hearing, your touch, your tactile sensation, your position sense, and even your taste and smell. Functional limitations that may affect cognition could be learning, reading, spelling, problem solving, organization, and time management. And lastly, mental health functional limitations may include attention, memory, which could include short-term or long-term, frustration tolerance, and depression and anxiety. So again, as I stated, accommodations really level that playing field. It allows an equal opportunity for employment during the interview process and during work. Working individual must perform all the essential job functions to the same standard as other workers in the same job classification. So that means the same quality and quantity of work must be performed by all. All right, Renee, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about the reasonable accommodation process.
Thank you very much, Amy, for sharing that initial information with us. Again, I'm Renee, and we're going to talk about what is the reasonable accommodation process. So let's start again with what an accommodation is. An accommodation actually bridges the gap between what the worker's abilities and limitations are and the essential functions of the job. Understanding what your abilities are, not what you hope they will be, and understanding what the essential functions of the job, whether that's work or school, is essential for successful accommodations. When you start requesting accommodations, this is actually the beginning of what is called the interactive process. This means the employee or the individual with a disability is an active part of the process. Medical documentation or a list of their functional limitations may be needed. And once the barriers or functional limitations are determined, again, whether that is employment or learning, we will consider all accommodation options. And remember, again, we are working together on this. Then maybe an accommodation option is identified, and then we trial it. There may be a time frame for this trial to determine whether it's effective or not, because you don't always know immediately. If the accommodation is effective, great. If it's not effective, then we can go back to step 3 and reassess and pick another accommodation to trial. However, be aware that there will be times when a reasonable accommodation simply doesn't work. So when is a reasonable accommodation required? When limitations in function resulting from a disability prevent an employee from performing the essential job functions at the minimally acceptable level in terms of quality and quantity. So first, they must be disabled under the ADA. And remember, like Amy said just a short while ago, this is not a diagnosis. Next is the disability must result in functional limitations. And finally, functional limitations must prevent the employee from successfully performing the essential functions of the job. An individual meets the American with Disabilities Act definition of disability that would qualify them for reasonable accommodations if they have a physical or a mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activity. Sometimes this is referred to in the regulations as an actual disability. If a disability is not obvious to the employer, they can ask for medical documentation from a healthcare provider to confirm the need for an accommodation. And then there's individuals who are solely regarded as having a disability, but do not have a disability, are not qualified to receive the reasonable accommodations. So a reasonable accommodation is any change to the application or the hiring process to do the job, to the way the job is done, or the work environment that allows a person with a disability who is qualified for the job to perform the essential functions of that job and enjoy equal employment opportunities. Accommodations are considered reasonable if they do not create undue hardship or direct threat. So reasonable accommodations, it's not always a straightforward, easy process. So even if it can be quite complex. So even if an accommodation is reasonable, Employers are not required to provide it if doing so would cause them an undue hardship. So an undue hardship is an accommodation that would cause a significant difficulty to an employer. To determine whether an accommodation would cause an undue hardship, you have to consider the resources and circumstances of the particular employer in relation to the cost or difficulty of providing the specific accommodation. Likewise, employers can deny a reasonable accommodation if the employee's request would pose a direct threat to the safety of other employees or customers. So what's a direct threat? Well, it's defined as a significant risk of substantial harm to the health or safety of that employee or to others, which cannot be eliminated or reduced by a reasonable accommodation. And determination requires case-specific evaluation of all the factors at play. Ultimately, that means each individual with their strengths and their challenges and in relation to the essential functions of their job is unique. Each evaluation is case-specific or person-specific. There is not a one-size-fits-all accommodation or approach. Once an accommodation is put in place and is successful, that does not mean that there won't be changes in the future. Ongoing assessment of the accommodation is essential. The accommodation may need to be adjusted or modified dependent upon the skill changes of the employee. Job duties also change, right? As we get promotions, we might have some different needs, and accommodations may need to be readdressed at that point. Technology changes and updates are often necessary to allow technologies to work together. How often do you have to update your computer or your cell phone? I'm thinking it's happening all the time, at least it feels like it with my equipment. Often because the technology is actually constantly changing or bugs are discovered and corrected. So reasonable accommodations have those upgrades and are similar. Ooh, I think I messed up. Next slide. There we go. So if a reasonable accommodation is needed, the employer may bring in a subject matter expert to help identify possible reasonable accommodations. This is not required by the ADA. However, an evaluation completed by a neutral third party is often very beneficial. It is the employer's responsibility to pay for the outside assessments to identify the reasonable accommodations. And did you know the Business Network Division of Michigan Rehabilitation Services has staff who can assess and make reasonable accommodation recommendations for clients or staff who request these reasonable accommodations. Next slide. So what businesses are exempt? The law mandates that an employer cannot discriminate against employees based on their disability and requires the company to provide reasonable accommodations to them to enable them to perform the duties of the position. Businesses that employ less than 15 full-time employees are exempt. This does not mean that other equal opportunity requirements are not in place. The state and other titles of the ADA may actually be in effect. Private clubs and religious organizations are exempt. Tribal-run casinos are exempt because they are actually sovereign nations. And seasonal employers, those who hire employees for less than 20 calendar weeks per year, are also exempt from this. Next. What is assistive technology? Well, let's talk about it. Next. Assistive technology is any item, piece of equipment, software program, or product system that is used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of persons with disabilities. Assistive technology can be low-tech or high-tech. Amy spoke of that earlier. Assistive technology can be computer hardware or software, or apps. Assistive technology can be inclusive or specialized learning material, software, or curriculum aids, easy for me to say. AT, assistive technology, can be much more. It can be electronic devices, it can be wheelchairs, walkers, braces, it can be educational software, it can be power lifts, a pencil holder, eye gaze, and head trackers, and so much more. Assistive technology helps people who have difficulty speaking, typing, writing, remembering, pointing, seeing, hearing, learning, walking, and many other things. Different disabilities require different assistive technologies. Assistive technology can be bought off the shelf, it can be modified, or it can be custom made. I am so sorry. Okay. 3 types of technology used for accommodations: mainstream technology, assistive technology, and emerging technology. Mainstream technology is typically any technology that is intended for general use rather than for use entirely or primarily by people with disabilities. Assistive technology is the term for assistive, adaptive, and rehabilitative devices for people with disabilities or for the elderly population. It is a device or piece of equipment or product system, whether acquired commercially, modified, or customized, that is used to increase, maintain, or improve function capabilities of individuals with disabilities. And then finally, there's emerging technology, and this is a term generally used to describe a new technology, but it could also refer to continuing development of an existing technology. Matching assistive technology to the user is really a lot like hitting a moving target. The needs of the individual changes. As we age, we may struggle with our vision or our hearing. We may be a student, and then we become an employee, so the tasks we have will change, or our needs for the technology will change. And technology changes. Technology changes very quickly. There are updates, new versions, better programs being developed and available for use every day. To have a computer read text to you used to be done only using specialized software. Now, Microsoft has a search engine, Edge, and that has a built-in reader that is functional and super easy to use. Assistive technology is really not the silver bullet. It is not magic. Do not expect an individual to use a special program or a laptop and suddenly all their challenges disappear. There is no magic, and there is always a learning curve with any new strategy or technology. Careful assessment and understanding of the individual's needs, their strengths, and their limitations is essential. Their understanding of the expectations for the technology is also important. What is it supposed to accomplish? Clearly, understanding this information will increase the likelihood of having success. Next. So a technology assessment actually has some rules. It is important not to focus on the answer before everyone agrees to what the question is. Have you seen those new Apple laptops? They are so cool looking. I know if I had one of those, I am sure I could get my work done so much faster. Well, apparently that's the answer before we've even asked the question. There is always also more than one answer. This may be an answer for someone wanting technology as far as that new Apple laptop. However, what does the individual need to accomplish, and how will technology assist them in accomplishing that? Once that is understood, looking at different technologies to determine what is best and will meet their needs occurs. The best answer will change over time and as technology changes. Task functions change and a client's skills and interests change. Once that best answer and technology has been identified and implemented, everything is better forever? Well, no. Over time, the individual, the technology, and the needs and expectations will change. Issues to be considered when assessing and recommending technology. Well, there's financial implications. How much does the technology actually cost? Is there going to be a monthly fee with this? Is there a fee to update? Anticipated lifespan of the equipment, how long will the technology last? An iPad may last 20 years because you took super good care of it, but at some point it will need to be upgraded because it will no longer work with the newer apps and the newer system upgrades. That 20-year-old iPad then becomes a paperweight. The ability to carry, manipulate, and care for equipment must be considered. So where does the equipment need to be used? In class, at home, at both? If strength and endurance are issues, maybe having a laptop computer at home and a compatible tablet to use to carry in class would be best to meet the individual's needs. Needs versus wants. What is needed is not necessarily the latest and greatest technology. Sometimes the simpler solution is not only most effective, but it is also most durable. And finally, vocational application. Any strategy or technology used in high school or training should transition into employment. For example, often high school students will have a parapro read tests or information to them, and that works beautifully. However, they will not have a reader on the job. So how can they get that information read to them, but independently? Next slide. Training. So which comes first, the accommodation or the computer? I had a student who was legally blind, and we were working on computer access with him. However, he was at that time not diagnosed as being legally blind and therefore had never been taught how to use low vision or blind technology. When we were working together, he was super frustrated. I was super frustrated. He needed to learn the accommodations for his vision while he was learning how to use the computer. So in that case, they went hand in hand. Prepare for repair means have a backup plan in place for when technology breaks, because technology, as we know, it's not a matter of if, but when technology will break down. So what can you do as a counselor? Talk to your customers. Have a conversation about what their backup plan is when their accommodation breaks. Do they have a charger at school or work for their electronic device, or do they keep an extra with them? Remind them it is their responsibility to have that backup plan in place. Needed repair. All technology, low tech and high tech, will eventually need repair at some point. So what will you do when this occurs? Who do you contact for the repair? What do you do without that tool or technology when it's getting repaired? Do you just not function for 2 weeks? We once again had a student who used a walker to ambulate. He was away at school and his walker broke. He had no replacement walker or backup plan to get from point A to point B at school. This was a significant barrier to his ongoing training. We were able to help him problem solve and build a plan, but going forward, he made sure that he was going to have his extra walker, because he had one, available and at hand in case it was needed. And now I hand it over to Amy.
All right, thanks, Renee. Wow, that was a lot of great information. You need to stretch and grab a drink of water. Okay, so who pays for accommodations on the job, including the assistive technology? Next slide. So the employer is responsible to providing reasonable job accommodations. The employer chooses which accommodation to implement with input from the employee. Remember that interactive process with the employer and the employee. So personal equipment like hearing aids and wheelchairs are not considered job accommodations, but MRS can provide equipment that falls outside the scope of the ADA or is being recommended based on customer preference, exceeding what the employer deems as reasonable and effective. So we're going to go through some assistive technology as a job accommodation. And the first one is concentration accommodations. So some ideas would be to reduce clutter, clean off that desk, reduce those distractions as much as possible. As far as reducing distractions and clutter on your computer screen within Windows, there's an item called Focus Assist. It's a feature available in Windows 11 that allows you to suppress notifications to avoid unnecessary interruptions while working on a project or giving a presentation. So in older versions of like Windows 10, Focus Assist was called Quiet Hours. Again, it allows you to hide all incoming notifications so they don't grab your attention with a visual banner or some sound effect. All right, some other concentration accommodations maybe would include a white noise machine, raise the panels or walls if the person is in a cubicle style setting and there's a lot of people, maybe relocate that person to a low traffic environment. And sometimes headphones can help with concentration, just having that noise reduction, or some people like just a steady sound, or can focus really well when they're listening to music of their choice. So some problem solving accommodations might be visual problem solving aids or a job aid, a checklist, maybe using a flow chart, and introduce those problem solving components to the supervisory process when you're on the job. That can really help. Some other problem solving, there's an app called Mind Maps, or it's a software, and that can assist with problem solving. Again, it's called Mind Maps. All right, so moving on to organization accommodations. Task reminder via digital devices, maybe like a calendar, a phone alarm, and then your calendar, and that could be paper or it could be computer or phone-based. Some people use all three or just one. I know it took me a while to transition from that paper to the computer and phone, but it's all on the computer and phone now. And then maybe color coding. The goal of color coding is always to be color purposeful as opposed to colorful. So start by identifying major categories or groupings of information among the papers you're seeking to organize, and then assigning a specific color for each. All right, motor impairment accommodations. A real popular one over the last several years, which has helped so many individuals, is a sit-stand option when they're working. This can address chronic pain. It allows a change in position and increased blood flow and oxygen to the muscles. There's a lot of different styles out there now. You can get ones that sit right on top of your work surface, or maybe an adjustable height table, maybe electric or crank style. What about larger handles? You can see the picture of the tools. The hammer and the screwdriver have a larger grip, so it's not so tough to hold on to. Increase in lever size and putting in the right levers. Carts for carrying objects. Use those carts rather than carrying that load very far. And scooters. Scooters can help significantly with decreased mobility. All these accommodations can conserve energy as well and protect the joints from that everyday wear and tear. So memory accommodations, journaling and writing notes are great way to help with memory strategies, maybe recording meetings or calendar, even taking pictures on your cell phone to help you remember where you parked, or if you're in a meeting or in a classroom, taking a picture can help with remembering the problem or the steps or the process of something. And again, if you're recording, make sure you get approval from the speaker or from the instructor. Some vision accommodations could be just increasing the size of the font, or maybe adding some contrast to your screen. Definitely lighting can make a big difference. Maybe an anti-glare screen protector, a screen reader, as Renee had mentioned, a magnifier, and even the bump dots. If you look on your F and J, your home row, those little bump dots can help for visual accommodations. Neural fatigue accommodations. First of all, what is neural fatigue? For individuals with brain injuries, sometimes this fatigue is known as cognitive fatigue, mental fatigue, is one of the most common and debilitating symptoms experienced during the recovery process. It can become a significant barrier to one's ability to participate in everyday activities. And this fatigue is organically based. It's not due to like excessive activity or abnormal sleep patterns. It can emerge suddenly without warning or after engaging in a cognitively demanding task. So some accommodations for this type of fatigue would include rest breaks and building that awareness of the causes and effects of that neural fatigue. Maybe a part-time work schedule with transition to full-time, maybe even working from home, that would help the individual. And scheduling tasks according to level of alertness or the peak performance times. And the next one, personality or behavioral accommodations. You want to allow time to adapt to change and have patience. Try to establish a calm, structured, predictable environment. Allow time for counseling appointments and definitely education. And that might be helpful to the individual as well as their coworkers or their family, disability awareness and that etiquette training. And a mentor may help. A mentor may share with a mentee information about his or own experiences, as well as provide guidance, motivation, emotional support, and role modeling. A mentor may help with exploring careers or helping that individual set goals, develop contacts, and identifying resources. So now we're going to go through a couple of case examples. I'm going to go through two, and then Renee will have a couple towards the end. So the first case study was actually a middle-aged woman that was involved in a car accident, and she had a traumatic brain injury, and she now has vision deficits because of that. Her vocation is a medical case manager, and she was returning back to that same position, so familiar position. But the barriers she noticed were impaired vision affecting the computer usage. Her essential functions of her job included being on the computer 90% of her day, and she was utilizing email, medical documentation review, and a lot of data entry. So some accommodations that helped her to be able to return to work full time was we first recommended that she have an appointment with the neuro-ophthalmologist. And that was really helpful to have that thorough evaluation, and they prescribed prism glasses. And the occupational therapist did a worksite evaluation with her and suggested a larger monitor. Modification of the screen contrast helped as well. Screen reading software, dictation software, such as Dragon Naturally Speaking, and an alternative keyboard. You can see the keyboard to the far bottom right, the black background with the yellow keys, and it was more of a large print keyboard as well to help her. And lighting, the overhead fluorescent lighting was removed, and a task lamp with full spectrum lighting was provided to her. So this allowed her to continue working in her full-time job. She was very happy and satisfied with the outcome, as well as her vocational counselor and occupational therapist. All right, case study number 2. So long hauler syndrome. We're starting to hear and see more about that, unfortunately. This gentleman is a full-time student at college. And although most people with COVID-19 get better within weeks of illness, some people are experiencing those post-COVID conditions. Post-COVID conditions are a wide range of new, returning, or ongoing health problems people can experience, they say, for 4 or more weeks after first being infected with the virus that causes COVID-19. Even people who did not have COVID-19 symptoms in the days or weeks after they were infected can have post-COVID conditions. These conditions can present as different types and combinations of health problems for different lengths of time. These post-COVID conditions may also be known as long COVID, long haulers, long-term effects of COVID, or chronic COVID. The CDC and experts around the world, as you know, are working to learn more about short and long-term health effects associated with COVID-19 and who gets them and why. And just to let you know, if you hadn't heard this, as of July 2021, long COVID, also known as post-COVID conditions, can be considered a disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. So this gentleman was experiencing fatigue, concentration, that brain fog we're hearing about, shortness of breath, joint pain, and anxiety. So those are his barriers. And as a student, it was important that the student meet with the Office of Disability Services to look at what accommodations could be approved and set up and what the college might be able to provide. So some accommodations and recommendations for this gentleman were smart pen, white noise, digital voice recorder, and various apps. So as you can see, various assistive technology can assist with the barriers identified. For the fatigue and concentration, we recommended breaks and providing written checklists and to-do lists. And also with the concentration to help reduce distractions was the white noise, and the earbuds with music worked really well for him. At his desk, we reduced the clutter and increased the natural lighting, again, using that full spectrum lighting. We modified ways instructions and feedback were given, written versus auditory, and tape recording instructions. Also implementing color coding schemes to help prioritize tasks, and using memory aids, email applications, using the calendar on his phone and within his computer so he wouldn't miss doctor's appointments and he had his school schedule in there. And as far as at school, allowing extra time to learn tasks and extended time to take tests or complete assignments. He also used a smart pen, which actually comes with special paper and an app. It lets you write by hand and instantly have that digital file. You can save files as PDFs or images, Word docs. Smart pens, most smart pens, not all, but some can also record too, which is great for lectures and interviews. And one thing we had to put in his reminders to keep the pen charged and ready, so you don't run out of the battery mid-sentence. The pen will still write, but it won't digitize everything. But that helped with the working memory and auditory processing to be able to upload that digital file. A digital voice recorder or app, such as voice memos to help with memory and that brain fog. And again, if recording, he had to get approval from the Office of Disability and the instructor or teacher. And then lastly, actually a couple more things, scheduling reminders on his phone and in his calendar to change positions and take stretch breaks to address the joint pain. So often we sit down and start working on tasks or studying, writing paper, and 2 hours later we haven't moved, and that does not help with joint pain. So making sure that there's reminders set to stand up and stretch. And lastly, the apps for relaxation and meditation that was utilized to address anxiety. And there's a lot out there. This particular one we suggested was the app called Calm. All right, I'm going to let Renee take it over to do the last couple case studies.
Thank you, Amy. All right, case study number 3. We have a computer programmer who works from home full time, and he has experienced a TBI. He has decreased balance and mobility. He is a wheelchair user because of this. He has neurofatigue, or that mental fatigue that Amy spoke of earlier. His strength and coordination are impaired. Stairs are used to enter the home, and he has a multi-level home with his office in the basement, which means more stairs. Stairs and wheelchairs don't work well together. He also experiences chronic pain in his back and in his neck. So some of the accommodation strategies that we used included structuring days with rest breaks. Again, Amy spoke just a moment ago about forgetting to take rest breaks or moving ourselves to accommodate the neurofatigue. It is critical to take breaks prior to becoming fatigued. Don't wait until it's too late. We also use dictation software to help with typing due to his coordination deficits. We also had an adjustable height table to accommodate the wheelchair and possible changes once he stops using the wheelchair. And finally, assistive technology consultation to identify the best technology. And sometimes trial and error is needed. And again, there's a learning curve when you are learning new technology or new strategies. And so keep that in mind. And if you're the user, give yourself some grace as far as it's okay. It's going to take a bit to learn. Other recommendations included accessibility to his home. Again, he's a wheelchair user, and we consulted with a contractor who has knowledge of ADA requirements, and that piece is critical. As he makes progress and his wheelchair is no longer used, he's going to want bilateral handrails or handrails on both sides should be installed, and it's important to have that balance support for him. In the bathroom, there were accommodations also needed. He needs to perform proper ADLs for going to school or to work or just living. They may include, for the bathroom, replacing the tub with a low or no lip shower with grab bars, with a handheld shower and a wider entry into the bathroom. A shower chair may be needed also. If they weren't able to replace the tub with a no lip shower, an extended tub bench would be recommended. Also, a high-rise commode will make standing up from the toilet a whole lot easier. And then we have case study 4. This is a young man with Klippel-Trenaunay syndrome, phantom limb syndrome. He had multiple amputations. He had major depressive disorder, general anxiety disorder. He had one arm and one leg. He was in post-secondary school, so after high school, to learn to become a pharmacy assistant. So some barriers for him. He only has one arm and was learning to perform tasks typically performed by individuals with 2 working arms. These tasks included, and they're things that pharmacy assistants do all the time, counting pills, opening and closing tamper-resistant medication bottles, affixing that prescription label to the medication bottle, that sticky label that goes on the outside of your prescriptions, standing for extended periods of time, heavy lifting with, again, just the one arm, reaching supplies that were either very high or very low, and donning or doffing or putting on and taking off a latex glove. Some of the accommodation strategies that we used were using a left-handed counting tray to fill the prescription orders. They make right-handed and left-handed, so we use left-handed with him. We use Dicem on the counter, and this picture represents that blue stuff below the pill bottle. That's the Dicem. And we placed the medication bottle on top of the Dicem. We didn't use the Dicem up top, but it stabilized the bottle so that he could remove and replace the lids onto the bottles. We also used that same Dicem on the surface, on the counter surface, while he was affixing the prescription label. It made it steadier for him. He also used the Dicem to stabilize the medication bottle while pouring pills into it from that counting tray. We used a standing stool for extended periods of standing time. He had a prosthetic leg, and he was not able to comfortably stand for 6 hours. So he was able to use a sit-stand stool. Also discussed breaking heavy deliveries into smaller and manageable sizes that can be managed with one hand. Part of a physician or of a pharmacy assistant's responsibilities is to stock the bulk medication. And some of that medication comes in pretty heavy cartons. So being able to open the carton and put the containers up into the shelving separately was the strategy we used. He used a step stool to reach for the higher shelving for stocking, and understand that at the higher levels on shelving is the lighter supplies. You don't put the heavy stuff, the liquid stuff up top. That goes lower on the shelving. And finally, we did a glove jig to don and doff, or to put on and take off his latex glove. And on this next slide is a little video showing how the glove jig is used. You only see part of it right there, attaching the cuff of the glove onto 4 kind of posts, put his hand down in it, and there the glove is on. This glove jig is attached to his belt, so that wherever he is in the pharmacy, he can don and doff a glove. And that glove jig also has like a little hook on it where he can hook the glove when it's on him to pull it off inside out. All righty. Here are some resources. Michigan Rehabilitation Services, Brain Injury of America, Job Accommodation Network is a wonderful resource to look up some simple, quick information. Brain Injury Association of Michigan, National Institutes of Health, or the NIH, and the Center for Disease Control, CDC. Any questions?
Renee, this is Claudette. There was a question by Marguerite that I couldn't answer, so she wanted to bring it to the full group.
Did she type in her question?
Oh,
Claudia?
let me try to find. She asked, what if they don't, the first question that she asked was, what if employers who do, what if the employer who does the interviews, I know they can't discriminate on allergies. And then her second question, I believe related to that, was, what if they don't have anyone to do the interviews and they don't? So I don't know if Marguerite might be able to provide any additional clarification.
I'm not quite sure yet what the question, what she's asking.
Okay, Marguerite, I unmuted you. You should.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. I am asking is what if the interview said that they are allergic to dogs
Do you mean it?
and they cannot find anyone to do the interview.
So if you have a service dog and the employer has somebody doing the interview that has allergies,
Yes,
is that a reasonable accommodation to have them find somebody without allergies to interview you?
yes. Some people this is my own experience.
Based on your own experiences?
Somebody told me that they cannot discriminate against the allergy part. But
Again,
they also said that they could not find anyone to do the interview or that is not qualified to do the interview.
They possibly do the interview virtually.
that would be one way around it for sure.
Yep. Or I don't know if you could have a clear partition, you know, be divided a little bit between the service animal and the interviewer in E.
Yeah.
Right. Because nowadays people do a live interview in person with a sitting there and they are qualified to do the job. But some people tell me not to bring my sitting stuff, but I need my sitting stuff with me due to my problem, due to my medical problem.
I'm not clear on the question, Marguerite, but to me, I don't believe they can discriminate against you for bringing your service dog to an interview.
This is Claudette, and the Americans with Disabilities Act does not speak to service animals one way or the other. They are a potential accommodation, but they're only one potential accommodation. So that if there was a reason why the employer did not want to have the service animal at the interview, and if the person who was interviewing is allergic, that would be a potential issue for them. The discussion would have to be, what other things might we be able to do in order to allow you to interview? And so the virtual interview, having a personal care attendant assist you instead of the service animal, or some other things may be appropriate, so that you can't say they have to allow it in their work site because of that. The same thing would be true if the work site were in a clean area. If you were applying for a job and they were going to do a tour of the kitchen in a restaurant, you would not be able to bring a service animal there for health and safety reasons. So there are some situations where you can't bring a service animal into a work environment because of the safety or potential damage for the other workers. And does that help?
Marguerite, did that help you? You're on mute.
Yes or no? Because somebody advised me not to go for the interview. Or a person to do the interview separately.
Separately.
Right. But the only issue I have, or my friends have, is that when somebody else gets the job that's qualified, and I do not get the job,
Well,
that
did we answer your question, Marguerite?
person,
Partly, okay.
And again, just to, all job accommodations are very much specific to the person who is applying or working the job, as well as the requirements at the work site of the job. And so it's hard to be able to compare from one to the other. And everything, they always need to be individually looked at to see what is reasonable in this situation with this person for this type of job. So it's hard to have general statements. One of the other questions that was brought up was whether there was an organization that assists disabled individuals in obtaining assistive technology with a reduced cost or a monthly plan. And I wanted to point out that there is the assistive technology, the Michigan Assistive Technology Program, that is a grant that is run by the Michigan Disability Resource Center. And they have different kinds of supports that they can allow people to try equipment and have short-term loans. And they also have a plan for low income or low interest loans to be able to purchase assistive technology. So that is a good resource to be able to look at.
I think you might be speaking about Michigan Disability Rights Coalition's Michigan Assistive Technology Program.
Yes, that's what I meant.
The lending portion of that program, the loans, is actually the program that I run at Michigan, at MI-UCP. The rest of it, the lending of equipment, short-term loans of equipment, that kind of a thing, would be through Michigan Disability Rights Coalition. But the financial piece, the mini loans and the Michigan Assistive Technology Loan Program is our program at MI-UCP. We partner with MRS also for things that customers want in their plan that maybe don't fit exactly in the plan. So if somebody wanted a different piece of equipment, they would be able to apply for the loan as an adjunct in an addition to their plan to get the equipment they want.
Okay. There also were a couple of questions related to services that Michigan Rehabilitation Services can provide, and if there is a cost for those services. If the person who has a disability is a client of Michigan Rehab Services, there is no cost. If the person is not a client and chooses not to become a client of MRS, then the service is to the business. And in some situations, there may be a cost for some assessment. Generally speaking, though, we try to keep that so that there is no cost, so that we can provide the best service for both the business and the individual with a disability who is looking to be hired or to retain their employment. Were there any other questions? I don't see any other questions coming in.
Okay, well, thank you to Amy, to Renee, and Claudette. We very much appreciate all the information that you gave us today and shared with us, and thank you all for attending as well. We're happy to have these presentations monthly, and in our next presentation, we'll hear from Joshua Schuler, Vice President of Clinical Services at Axio Bionics. He's an experienced physical therapist with more than 20 years in a wide variety of rehabilitation programs for individuals with orthopedic and neurological conditions. Axio Bionics has developed a unique and innovative treatment for muscle atrophy, pain, spasm, swelling, and decreased circulation. They describe their treatments as non-invasive and non-pharmacological. Please join us to learn more about Axio Bionics wearable therapy electrical stimulation systems on March 10th at 10 a.m. And please reach out to the email in the chat if you are submitting for the continuing education. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.